It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, April 30th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is finding some interesting similarities between Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett's season.
Surprisingly.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And to keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, it's a little quiet for my liking related to the head coaching search. And, some other teams are doing stuff, as we talked about. Pittsburgh made a change. Yesterday. So what gives?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, we saw that, Danny seemed to have been slow to get a list going. Is it because Rick Tocchet said, I'd like the job, but give me a few days? I don't know. The thing about it is, I would say we didn't feel like at the very beginning that there was much speed in the process. And it's not like it has to be the fastest, but you're going up against, 6 other teams now? Is it 7? I'm losing track.
Yeah, 7 right now.
7. So you're going up against 7 other teams. You better get on the stick because, you're not the number one destination, and all these other teams have choices too.
Yeah, it's getting to be a crowded carousel for the coaches.
Maybe it looks better for Brad now. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. It really is. It's kind of the safe choice in a lot of ways, but it's kind of the devil in a lot of ways. But there is a certain appeal to it from a perspective of a certain degree of continuity, and also why not give him a shot? Worst case scenario, work out.
But as you and I know from being in the corporate world, even if that is your intended guy, you still have to interview the field,
due diligence
to make sure he's the best qualified person.
Yep. And maybe there's somebody out there that has a specific kind of plan for the Flyers. You got to listen. Yeah, you got to listen, of course. And I think kind of everybody knows that. But the longer the days continue to pass, the more anxious I think people get about this and, how it relates to those other openings out there that you mentioned. On today's show, we are going to get to your mailbag questions, but we're taking a look at the seasons that Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett just had. And it's really interesting when you look at these two in particular here, because this is the season for Travis Konecny where he had the most points of his NHL career thus far. Now, he has not had a complete 82-game season since 2018-2019, which is completely bonkers to think of. But in that year, he had 49 points, and in this most recent season, 76 points. And it seems like a lot, but yet in some ways it also feels a little disappointing in some ways.
Yeah, I would say it's disappointing. I would think with Konecny, we all knew he would get hurt every season with the way he plays. It's just
right,
part and parcel of the guy. You don't expect him to play every game. I don't. So that's okay. Yeah, this year, because he was in the top 10 in scoring for such a long time, I mean, I don't know what he ended up with, but he probably, with that point total, he's probably 30, 35. And that is disappointing.
Yeah, I think so. And to have that be the top point getter for your team, it's not enough to carry you through. You need 3 guys at that level or above, right?
Yeah, I mean, Michkov's going to get that number or more next year.
Sure. Yeah, see, he wound up with 63 points, so not
Yeah.
too far behind Travis Konecny, and, this kid's a rookie. Now, completely different scale of skill here, but
Hmm.
still, like, Travis Konecny is a first-round draft pick in the NHL, and so the expectations are gonna be high no matter
Top
what,
line,
right?
top power play. Like he gets the
Mhm.
opportunity, and in the NHL, when you get that kind of opportunity, you do have to put up the points.
Yeah. Now, Owen Tippett, we're going to get to in more detail later, but just for some comparison perspective here, 43 points this season, was tied with Tyson Foster for fourth place on the team as far as scoring with those 43 points. It's a very different kind of a year that he had because in his case, his point total went down from the previous year. We're going to
Yes.
get to that, but continuing on Travis Konecny here, I think sort of for me, the eye test on him this year is that, he tried too hard down the middle and gave up the puck a lot. And we saw that game after game after game. And I think, you know, it kind of took away from his production. Like, just try something different, Travis.
Yeah, I think the problem with Travis is when points aren't going and things aren't going well, then all of a sudden the frustration does set in for him. And so I think that's a thing with him. I would say this though. I would say after the first, let's say 25 games, we didn't see that kind of reckless fire out of him that kind of gets him going and really gets the team going. And definitely didn't see any of that in after the Four Nations and probably even before that. So that part is disappointing because even if you're not scoring points, you still can create havoc. It's not like Brady Kachuk stops creating havoc out there. He
Right.
never does.
Yeah, it is interesting because in some ways you want Travis Konecny to mature a little bit, right? You want him to
Yes.
not take stupid penalties, which he did earlier in his career. But he, as we mentioned in a previous episode, is, if not, a long-term member of the Flyers core, is certainly in the Flyers core now
Oh yeah.
and is an essential part of this team and is one of the few players that I think we agree on that will carry forward for the time being, assume they don't trade him, but
Right.
he's a guy that they want to keep around.
Hmm.
And so given all that, like, you do want him to mature and be a leader and all of that, but you also want him to be himself out there. And I think that's a
Right.
delicate, like, line to toe, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, there probably will be a point in his contract because he's not the biggest guy where he's not able to pull off all these things like he used to, but he shouldn't be there yet. Like it shouldn't be in year one. And so year two, we should be seeing more of that following through. And again, the other complication now with him is if he is going to try and make this Olympic team because he was on the
Mm,
Four Nations and didn't play, he's got to train differently because he simply ran out of gas.
yeah, and he had a little over 20 minutes average time on ice per game here. And I
That's
feel
normal
like,
for a guy like his of his
yeah, I
ilk.
feel like that is normal. And that's where, like, okay, but the production should keep up with that. Because if that's like a normal amount of ice time, he should be able to earn more points than that. And interestingly, he only had 8 power play goals this
That's not
season.
enough, yeah.
Yeah, that stands out to me. 13 points total on the power play, and he was tied for Mitchkov for most on the team. And you're like, "Ugh, I know Mitchkov is great, but Travis Konecny should be far and away the leader in power play points on this team."
Right. Just for happenstance, I looked up Sidney Crosby, right? He's 37.
Yeah,
So he had
yeah,
91 points. He played 2022. That was his average at
hmm,
37. Now, I'm not saying
yeah,
that Travis Konecny has to be Sidney Crosby, but what I'm saying is even a guy like Sidney Crosby got 91 points on a horrible team. So that's how we
yeah.
know Konechny could have gotten around 90 points on this team.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have said 90, but maybe I would have said at
Well, on the
least
pace he was
84,
on,
85. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
84,
true.
84, yeah,
At the pace he was on early in the season, absolutely. I
yeah.
agree with you there. I think, what's interesting as well, if you look at his shot attempts per 60 at 5-on-5, that's 14.35, which was third on the team behind Mitchkoff and Tippett, which we're going to get into Tippett's shot attempts and that whole thing. But I do think that's about right as far as the pecking order of shot attempts on the team. It's just the number needs to go up, right?
Right. Yeah, the number definitely needs to go up. Maybe it's the way he goes about it. If the number doesn't go up, maybe it needs to be more high dangery.
Mhm.
That would be okay. If the number doesn't go up because you have other guys now that are wanting the puck, then you've got to be that much more accurate or dangerous.
Right. Now, defensively, he was also a hot mess.
He
And
always kind of is, though.
yeah, I just think it was at an extra level. He had 96 giveaways
Yeah,
this season.
that is
And
an extra level.
23 of those giveaways were in the defensive zone. It's one thing if you're in the offensive zone, but that is a high percentage. That's about a
Yeah.
quarter of those giveaways were in the defensive zone. And he's got to be a little bit more responsible, I think, with the puck in those circumstances. And it stood out to me just like from an eye test perspective,
Yeah.
and the number was there, right?
Yeah, the problem for the team with that number is he's matching up against other teams' best players. And so if he's giving away the puck, like if a third liner is giving away the puck like this, okay, they're third line players that are getting it. They're not
Right.
as much of a risk to score. The guys he's giving it up to, they all score.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. All right. We're going to dive into the shot attempt numbers, comparing Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett, and then get more into Owen Tippett's season coming up next.
The NHL playoffs are in full swing, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists in the NBA or goals assists in the NHL, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after puck drop, you could even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big here. I still go with the Washington Capitals. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
All right. On tomorrow's show, we are going to dig into the Flyers salary cap as it currently stands and crunch some numbers and see what the Flyers should be doing from a cap perspective this upcoming off season. Plus, we're going to talk about NHL draft prospect Braden Coots, who is on a lot of people's radar right now.
He
And
is.
he's doing real well at U18s at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward to talking about him. Now, comparing Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett on shot attempts, we've noticed that this past season, Owen Tippett especially, but Travis Konecny to a slightly lesser degree, we're missing the net a lot
Oh, yeah.
this season, right? And what's fascinating here is that when everything netted out, both of them had 188 shots on goal this
Crazy.
season. Right. Crazy that it turned out that way. Now, Owen Tippett had 20 more shot attempts to get there than Travis Konecny did, which shows Owen Tippett's shooting problem here. Travis Konecny missed 108 shot attempts. Tippett had 107, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Tippett had 129 shots blocked. TK had 108 shots blocked. So I think it just shows that Owen Tippett, like, he's missing the net and he's shooting in places where the shots are easily blocked. And that's really evident in how his season played out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just odd to me that this team made an investment in him, and for the last 2 years, his shooting percentage, like we all see how he missed the net. And I talked about it ad nauseum, and now we're talking about it again. Like, why can't this get corrected? They're going to get a new skills coach, make it a shooting coach. Like, that's the easy answer here. But we'll see. As far as what he needs to do, somebody needs to actually. This is the thing. Remember in the press conference, he didn't realize he took less shots this year. right?
Yeah.
So was there a filter between the analytics department and the player? Was John did the buck stop there? Did the reports die there? It seems so. And it can't be that way. Somebody has to sit down, Owen, and say, listen, when you play instinctual hockey, you are playing at your best. What's going on out there? Are you thinking too much? Are you trying too hard? Like, I'm sure a little of that's gone on, but I don't think enough has. And I think the problem with the hockey world is, and this is something where I've talked to a lot of people, and you see it a lot of times. The older school coaches are like, he'll work his way out of it. How many times do we hear in a press conference, we're just going to let him go, we're going to put him on this line, and he'll figure it out? Well, sometimes players don't, especially when Tippett's really never figured it out. Do you want him to be a 20-something goal scorer? Or do you want him to be a 30-goal scorer? Like, you paid him to be a 30-something goal scorer, and that may not happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because last season, to that point about reducing shot attempts, 544 shot attempts last season. This year, 424. So
Why?
over 100 difference.
Yeah.
And there was a confidence that just disappeared. And I think partially, like, at least from an eye test perspective, it feels like his move wasn't working and he didn't know what to do at that point. That little drive down the middle, curve out to the left, and then either backhanded or forehanded, depending on the goalie positioning, but more often than not forehanded, right? And so I think that was part of the problem from my perspective. The other part of the problem for me was that I don't think he had good chemistry with anyone this year. And so he kind of felt like a lone wolf a lot of times out there. And I just feel like if he feels that there's confidence that, because he's faster than pretty much everybody out there, right?
There's no doubt.
So he gets up ice and then is waiting and then is like, there just wasn't cohesion for him this year. I felt like in a way that there was last year.
Yeah, I think that you have to put him with guys that will set him up. And he has to be the number one shot creator on his line. So he has to be like a third line guy now to be that shot creator. And I think that's the way it's got to go. And then you've got to have him back on the power play, not put him on his offside, which was a horrible idea because he was just lost. And that really hurt him on his power play. I don't know how many power play goals he ended up with, but I'm sure it wasn't great.
Yeah, this year, would you like to know the grand total of power play goals?
5?
0.
0. That's insane. And you can't blame it all on Rocky. You can't.
Right. He only had 20 goals this season. He had 28 last year, 27 the year before. Yeah. And all 20 of them were at even strength. So that's huge. That is a huge, huge problem. And I think when you look at the circumstances of it, I think it's fair in some ways to say, okay, we had that Kate's line, which we talked about on yesterday's show and how successful they were. And so that line kind of got locked in. And that's where Owen Tippett's in would have been. It's somewhere in that group, because as the season progressed and they were trying to figure out what to do with Michkov. I mean, Owen Tippett had a shot with Michkov being on the same line, and it didn't work.
No.
Right? Because Tippett, again, I thought was too much of a lone wolf, and Michkov was trying to be a playmaker, and it was like oil and water here. And I didn't feel like that worked. And that is why Tippett wound up relegated to a third line role, which isn't ideal for him. But when you're not producing, that's where you end up. I'd be interested to see in a kind of a longer term experiment here, because Ryan Poehling did kick things into gear as the late season emerged. Could that be something that would help Owen Tippett in the long term? From the beginning of a season. We've talked about Ryan Poehling and can he do this at the beginning of a season?
And he doesn't even know.
And And so if he can do that, would that benefit Owen Tippett? I would say there's a high chance that it would, because Poehling also has the speed to keep up with Owen Tippett. So they're both driving down the ice together and can make something happen. I'd be interested in that more long term.
I would too. I mean, because look, here's the long and the short of it. Danny gave this guy $6.2 million a year. If he turns into a third liner that scores you 22 goals a year at 6.2, it's a bad contract. So you don't want it to go that way. So you've got to start now trying to turn this around, because I'm pretty sure, I mean, I know with the hype that they were giving, they thought he was going to score 40 goals. Well, he's going to need a lot of help to score 40 goals.
Yeah, and if somehow between Poehling and Tippett, they can put something together to get 50 to 55 goals combined, I think that would be a success at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, compared to what we're seeing, absolutely, we'd all sign up for that.
Yeah, so I think that Owen Tippett is in just such an interesting position right now. I think he does have opportunity here.
He does have opportunity.
He's got to work on.
I don't know if he gets it though. Like look, I know players have pride, but at the end of the year, he kind of felt like his season was pretty good, and he should have been given the Travis Konecny talk. Like we're like Konecny beats himself up even if he has a good year, because that's what Konecny does, right?
Right.
Tippett should have been doing that, and I didn't hear enough of that at his locker room clean out speech. So that's why I think somebody needs to sit him down. Maybe it'll be the new coach and just be like, set expectations right away. And if it's Brad, then Brad will be like, listen, there's a new hat on me, and now I'm seeing the offense more, and I'm not seeing nearly enough out of you, and this is what I think you should do. Somebody's got to do that.
Yeah, I think so. And, he's got like a modified no trade clause for 4 seasons, not this upcoming season, but then it kicks in. So I think this is where it's an interesting position for Tippett here, where the Flyers really have 1 more year to figure this out, and then their trade options are limited. So yeah, I think somebody does need to kick him into gear. Hopefully it will happen this off season. He'll start working on his shooting accuracy a little bit more, and we'll get there. But a lot of questions with Owen Tippett, and y'all have a lot of questions that got into our mailbag here, and we are going to dig into that coming up next. All right. On Monday's episode, we talked about the goalie dilemma that the Flyers have, and y'all had some great comments and a lot of different options here. So Mark Fisher commented, I still think Fedotov is going to be a star at 6'10". He had a couple great games, and Torts would then sit him. The other NHL teams would love to steal him.
Well, I think that's true. Teams would always love to steal any player, but the problem is if you're stealing him, he's got to be starting at the NHL level, right? So I don't know if I see a star. Like I'll go back way back to the World Juniors. Yes, back then he was on an upward trajectory. Then the Russian front happened, and so like we knew that he was going to have to make up development time somewhere, and I think he's making it up now. I still don't know if I see more than a 1B though. I'm going to have to be convinced on that. But he's definitely an NHL quality goalie. We know that.
I think so. It's just a matter of, can he get played in the right pattern that will optimize his game? And that's kind of what we talked about. That I think, at least for now, I still see him as a backup, but who knows? Maybe something more could emerge if he gets played on a regular basis, which he needs. There were a few more comments about other options. Ricardo said, go to Boston and trade your first for Swayman. Charles said, draft Joshua Ravensbergen and then figure it out until he's ready. Drill Baby Drill said, Zavragin might be the top goalie prospect in the world. And if Carson Bjarnason plays out, we just have to be in a holding pattern, and you shouldn't go crazy and get a free agent. I think that's part of the issue here, is there's so many options out there for the Flyers, and it's a delicate time because we are waiting. We're in this weird 2-year gap here, right?
So we'll take it one at a time. The Bruins aren't trading Swayman. They'd be admitting defeat there. They're not doing it. It was an off year for him, and why would you want a goalie on an off year? So no, check that as a no. Yes, Ravensbergen, draft him, no problem. Still going to take 4 years at best, maybe 3 if he's like really exceptional, but still, it's how long it's going to take. Zavragan's got, I think, 2 more years on a contract. Then you got to come over and have him adjust to North America. You can't just do what you did with Kolosov. No matter how good he is, even if he's the best prospect in the world, you have to do that. Every goalie has to play in the AHL. They have to, they must. If they don't, it's going to limit what they can do in the future. So you have to do that. So based on that, you're waiting 3 or 4 years. Every scenario, you're waiting 3 to 4 years. So you have to get another goalie to go at least 2 years in case, because even Bjarnason, best case scenario is in 2 years.
Yeah, I think so. And that's we're just trying to solve this stopgap.
You gotta fill that gap.
Yeah. And a free agent is probably the best way to do it, but limited options out there. So that's kind of where we're sitting there. On the head coaching search, Joseph was suggesting that there were 2 attributes that Briere talked about that he wanted in the next coach: the ability to teach and the ability to communicate. And so Joseph is suggesting, as we have talked about, to maybe look at AHL coaches. And so for Joseph, that name is Todd Nelson, the Hershey Bears coach. Ironically, Phantoms are playing Hershey in the playoff series starting tonight. And, I honestly don't remember if Russ, you and I talked about this offline or on the show, but we talked about.
We definitely talked about it at some point. I don't know if it was over coffee or that. I know.
I don't remember, but we talked about Pascal Vincent from Laval Rocket, who's also been a very successful coach. And I think both of those are great candidates that should be interviewed.
They should be interviewed. Vincent had a real short stretch with Columbus, I think it was. And that was, I think Torts replaced him, right? I think that's the way it kind of worked out. So, interview them both. But the thing is, there's no guarantee that either one of them is better than Brad. And so that's what you have to, they have to absolutely.
That's why you have to interview, though. And make
I get it. What I'm saying is there may be a reason why they're so good in the AHL and not elsewhere. And if that's the case, you already have that guy and Brad, who, is already in-house and knows players intimately. So they really have to knock it out of the park, but definitely interview him.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a good perspective to have. Yes. And, Hershey has been successful for a long time. So Todd Nelson is a great name to put on
the problem with Vincent is Laval is probably going to make it to the Calder Cup, might even win it. You'd be waiting a long time for him.
Yeah, that is also true. We did the episode on the Flyers core that I talked about earlier in the show, and Leadhead75 says a true core is having legit number 1 and number 2 centers and legit number 1 and number 2 defensemen and a top goalie. I don't care how many great wingers we have. Without these other elements, you won't win anything. We're the weakest at the most important positions.
I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, I think that was what we were struggling with in a lot of ways, where we're like, okay, we know Bichkov is part of the core. Konecny is part of the core until he isn't.
Right.
And then beyond that, we're like, we got to wait.
But you can't be so anti-winger either. Like if they get Porter Martone, he's going to be part of your core as a winger.
Yeah. Totally.
So there are exceptions to that. So don't get, I'm just trying to tell, was it Led something, whatever his name is. Don't get stuck in that mold, because there's going to be some play driving wingers like a Mitch Marner type or someone big like Martone that you're going to be like, okay, I get it.
Listen, if the Flyers can somehow swing Marner in a weirdo circumstance, I will take it every day because he's so good.
He is.
Oh, love him. We also did an episode on the Flyers' top pick and what they should do with it. And we talked about James Higgins, because Russ, you still have him at number 1 on your ranking list. And if he is available whenever the Flyers are picking, you think they should pick Higgins. And we had some comments about it. And Chris said, I think this is the first time I've agreed with Russ. I think the Flyers would be ecstatic with Higgins on their first pick.
It's the first for everything.
I know. Joseph, on the other hand, said, sorry, Russ, I'm not with you on Higgins. I lived in Boston and watched a good number of BC games this year, and Higgins just didn't stand out to me. And he compared Ryan Leonard's freshman season and Will Smith's to Higgins and said that he had fewer points.
Okay, hold on. So let's stop there.
Yeah.
So Leonard's a wing. Now Smith is a center. And if you want to tell me Will Smith's better than James Higgins, I think it's arguable. But the point is, he was a freshman. You watched a guy in a freshman year playing in Hockey East. The expectations were just too high for him to begin with. He had a good year. He was a point-a-game player. Listen, was that the best Boston? Was that the best team that he was on? No, they got beat in the Hockey East playoff, right? Before they even got into the tournament.
Right.
So it's not all on him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. It's like especially for freshmen in college hockey, what team they're on and what kind of ice time they get makes a big difference, and like who they're playing with and all of that. So it's kind of an apples and pears situation to me. Like you can't directly compare them, but I do understand like just looking at the points and being like, yeah, like he wasn't as good as Ryan Leonard, and well, I think
Ryan Leonard's already in the NHL, and Will Smith is in the NHL, and he's starting to excel. So, like, there's no shame here. Like, this, what are we talking about here?
Right. I know. Well, that's the thing is, like, I feel like those other guys, they could be better than James Higgins. We've already conceded the fact that this is a weaker draft than the drafts that both Ryan Leonard and Will Smith were in, right? So, of course, they're going to be weaker, but relative to the people in the current draft,
that's what
Higgins is the pick. And that's really the difference here.
Right.
Lastly, on Michael Misa, we had said, why not him? And he was injured during the playoffs and didn't go to U18s. And so what do you think the net effect is here?
The net effect is, I know that there were people talking like, hey, he was disappointing in the playoffs, period. He was disappointing in the playoffs the year before. Remember, there was a lot of talk about it because he was going to be the number one guy this year. Well, that stopped him from being the number one guy, but clearly he was driven by it, got a lot of points. But in the games he played, he didn't score a lot of points. He wasn't even a point a game. So now people are going to try and tell me that Michael Misa is better than James Higgins. I don't think so. James Higgins went up against 23-year-olds. Michael Misa didn't. Michael Misa needed to do better. Now, everybody gets banged up. So, like, if he's playing, he's got to be scoring. I'm sorry. Like, that's just the way it is. I think he's a terrific player. Like, if he's available for the Flyers, you take him. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying if I'm comparing the two, I will take the guy that has a chance to be a center who's already playing against tougher competition, where Misa is going to have to overcome a lot more when the competition changes.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all this nets out and when the Flyers are actually going to pick and who everybody picks before the Flyers, unless the Flyers get that first overall. So many factors still to come in all of this, and we will continue to talk about it, including on tomorrow's show. We're going to talk about Braden Coots. And very excited to do that, plus the salary cap. And as a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got questions on any of these potential draft picks you want us to answer, let us know via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. It's every game, every night, until that Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.